It's my distinct honor to welcome our presenter to the stage. Linda is the co-founder and vice president of Being First. This is a training and consulting firm specializing in leading conscientious transformation in Fortune 1000 companies, government, and large nonprofits. Linda was one of the original creators of the field of organizational transformation in the early 1980s, and she speaks globally on this topic, so we're thrilled that she's here with us. She's a co-author of several books, and you'll find those back in the bookstore. These include The Change Leaders Roadmap and Beyond Change Management. She's also spearheaded the development of the landmark Change Leaders Roadmap methodology. She coaches leaders and senior leaders on their enterprise-wide change strategies and their ability to lead consciously. Linda is known as an inspiring model of her work, and I welcome her today as she inspires you. Let's have a warm welcome for Linda.
Thank you all. So yes, I've been at this a while, and for those of you that haven't known me a long time, I used to be 6'4", and my hair was not gray. So I'm here to talk with you today about culture change, a strategic lever for sustained results. This is absolutely essential to the work that we do. And it's a core competency for us in the change field, no matter what angle we come to the change field from. Anything that we're assisting the organization to do differently, we're in the game of change. And culture is at the heart of it, especially these days. So not only is it a core competency, it's absolutely essential that we build this into our plans, into the ways in which we specifically support projects and support our organizations to do what they need to do to succeed. So let me just share with you quickly what we're going to be talking about today. I want to spend a few minutes talking about why culture is so important to sustained results. One of the things that is very clear to me is I'm frequently asked to come in and audit how changes are going and what organizations might need to do differently to course correct them, get them back on track. And one of the things that shows up frequently is we're not getting adoption, we're not getting sustainment. And at the core of that is something we've heard a lot about today: culture, mindset, and behavior, and how we go about affecting those things deeply. So much of the work of project management and the other resources that we have affecting change in the organization are what we call outside-in methodologies. You are doing something to your stakeholders, right? Ask a lot of people what their engagement strategy looks like. It looks like, well, I called them all together into a room and I told them what we were doing. That was my engagement plan, right? No. So really looking at the strategies and the modalities and vehicles we have to engage people from the inside out is what this is all about. So why it's so important? I want to explore with you a bit of how to assess cultural impacts of the projects that you're working on. And if culture is an overriding umbrella for the work you're doing in your organization, also how to look at culture. If you can't name it and if you can't touch it and feel it, how do you assess and change it? And so looking at how to actually see, name, describe the cultural impacts of what you're doing is absolutely essential. And lastly, I want to share with you 7 strategic levers that we use for changing culture. It's not just, which I've seen a lot of, check the box, yes, there will be culture change, okay, moving on, right? It's how do you actually put into your plans, what do we need to do about culture? And what are the elements of doing that? So we're going to spend our time on that. By way of background, and I know some of you may have read or seen this model, we feature 3 critical conversations about leading change. So anything that we do in supporting changes to succeed in organizations has to address all 3. And you'll notice that the graphic is a stool. It's a 3-legged stool, so we really need to look at all 3 legs. The first is the content of change. So if you think about a project that you are currently working on, something near and dear, something that you're able to influence, what's the nature of that? Is it structure, strategy, business process, IT? There's a lot of that going on. What is the nature of the change? And culture may actually be the content of your change. So we're looking at culture. Typically we have a lot of experts, whether we hire them in or we bring them in the organization, financial experts or IT experts or supply chain experts, to help us figure out the solution. This is where the solution lives, in the culture piece, in the content piece. The second leg of the stool is people. That's typically how we perceive ourselves. We're dealing with the people side of change. So this is the human dynamics. This is near and dear to us. How do we address people's mindsets, inside out, their commitment, their emotional reactions, their behavior, their ways of relating, how we engage them, and the cultural dynamics that are actually human-based, people-based, relationally based. So it's the people leg of the stool, very, very critical. And in addition then, and here's a leverage point for us, we address the process of change. Now, for those of you that are in organizations that currently have project management and project teams separate from your change management plans, okay, red flag right off the bat. Your process needs an integrated plan of content, people, and all the process dynamics of how do you get from where you are today to where you need to go? How do you address the A to Z roadmap, the actions required, who does what by when? How do you govern your changes? This is a key one. Who makes decisions? Who has authority? All of that is a leverage point for us to help the organization design. If you have multiple change efforts, how do you handle the integration of those change efforts so you have an accelerated change? So all of these are process pieces. And so what I want to say when I say the process is your leverage point, this is culture, people is culture, content is culture. We need to be seeing through a cultural lens. You would be designing an integrated process, looking at how the process can potentially model the future state culture and move the organization towards the outcome. Now, many executives as we go along say, well, all I'm interested in is the solution. Give me the right solution. And you take care of getting the people to do it, right? Immediately, we're starting from a cultural dynamic, that's mindset. That's a cultural dynamic that we need to address right from day one. So in your process, if you're called to the table after implementation or after design to get people to do what the solution requires of them, you're way late in the game. Way late in the game, and that's a cultural dynamic in your organization. Change starts the day the insights, the light bulb goes on. So I have this as backdrop because no matter what leg of the stool or what access point we have to change, culture is at play. So definition of culture for us, our way of defining culture. It's the mindset of an organization. It's the pattern of widely shared assumptions, beliefs, and values that really form the basis of people's ways of being, relating, and working with each other. It's mindset, it's beliefs, it's values, and it shapes how we do things around here. If you think about it, it's actually the human dynamic at scale. So where we're typically working on individuals or relationships, this is what happens at scale. So I want to right off the bat ask you, how many of you are actively involved in shaping culture plans in the projects that you're working with? Great. How many of you know culture is at play, but you can't figure out how to get at it? Okay, good, about a third. And how many of you know culture is at play, but you can't get your leaders to even recognize the word, right? A lot of hands there. Okay, so we've got all three going on. Those of you actively involved, I want you to test against some of the things that I'm talking about today around making culture change real and tangible and pragmatic in your projects. And there will also be some insights for those of you trying to figure out, how do we get our hands around this thing? I want to talk by start by talking a little bit about the elephant in the room around culture. It is not uncommon in the client systems that we work with that they say, well, we can't use the word culture around here. Why? Because it's the touchy-feely stuff. It's the soft stuff. How many of you, I would love to see a show of hands on, for each of these little quotes I'm going to give you, how many of you hear this in your own organization or sometimes in your own thinking? How many of you have or are faced with it's the touchy-feely soft stuff? Okay, I'm going to tell you a story shortly about that. It's the job of human resources or change management, not mine, says the line leader. How many of you get that one, right? Toss it over the fence to human resources. You got problems with culture, you got problems with resistance, give it to human resources or give it to change management. That's your job. You make these people do this, right? Wrong. It's too complicated and it gets in the way of progress. Yeah? Right. Because I can't feel it, I can't see it, I can't touch it, I can't measure it, right? So it doesn't make any sense to me. And because it's not controllable and can't be measured, it's not important. Why should we do this if we can't even, deal with it, right? How many of you experienced that one? A few. Okay. Lastly, it takes too much time. Few of you? Yeah. One of our client systems has a wonderful saying that goes, we never have enough time to do it right. We always have enough time to do it again. Right? So look at the mindset in each one of these. Look at the issue. It's our job to confront these mindsets in some way. Now, I don't mean belligerently or politically incorrect ways, but it's our job to figure out how do we raise awareness, conscious awareness, that these dynamics are very real in the minds of the leaders and the project managers that we work with in our work in the organization. I'll tell you one quick story. I worked with a very large defense contractor for several years, and in one of its major subsidiaries, it had a huge economic and political challenge to rapidly accelerate its production time for one of its fighter jets. And so that was huge, and they were working all over the place and around the clock, et cetera. And we had a meeting because they weren't making progress and they weren't getting to where they needed to get around the strategies they were using. So I had a group of the executives there, and I had the VP of finance. He was in charge of the budget, paying for all the support, really, stickler kind of a guy. And I said, one of the things that's standing in the way that I'm aware of, having done a bit of a change audit for them, is that culture's standing in the way. Immediately throws up his hands, throws up paper, really dramatic, and he says, I'm not dealing with that touchy-feely stuff. That's all the soft stuff. That's all crap. I don't want to hear the word culture in here. That's not what we're doing. It's like, okay. I'm a great one for embracing where people are at. So I didn't, go into freak out or anything. I said, let me give you an example of why this is so important. I said, so part of my findings are that your engineering department, responsible for engineering design improvements to accelerate production, and your manufacturing production line, responsible for, as lean as possible, accelerating production, they don't talk to each other. And they won't talk to each other, and they hate each other, and they're sending missiles at each other. How in the world can you get the outcome that you want if you can't get these two groups of people talking to each other? And he was well aware, all the executives were well aware of this riff in the organization. And so his eyes got big, and I said, that's culture. He went, okay, talk to me, right? So it was tangible, it was real, it was directly related to the outcome that organization was on the precipice of needing to create. So I share that with you, again, for you to look at what's real about this. I have 3 quotations from you from some of the gurus in the field that we read about and our executives read about and hear about. So, this one, Culture Eats Strategy for Breakfast from Jim Collins, right? Whoop, sorry. Oh, dear. Hang on a second here. All right, we've got a clicker problem. I'm going slowly. Hang on there, everyone. If this is familiar to you, think about how much you just learned. Okay. So, culinary strategy for breakfast. There we go. All right. Clicker problem. Can you see it? The key thing I learned at IBM is that culture is everything. Lou Gerstner, right? Ex-CEO of IBM. That's a biggie, because that's someone who lived it, who walked the talk. Having the conversations today, which were so moving and so fabulous from Bill and Gerard earlier today, it's all about culture. That's everything that they were talking about. How important that is as a core strategy. And lastly, early business process reengineering efforts failed because we neglected people and culture. John Cotter. I mean, realizing the first several years of that, and we're so involved in redesigning processes and organizations, really, really critical that we look at the human interaction as a part of it. So this is a reason why it's important to us. What I want to do is reinforce. So here's a check-in for you. If the change efforts that you're working on are transformational in nature, meaning there's a radical change in some formal element of the organization, structure, business strategy, IT, and a whole new mindset and culture is necessary. Like, Toto, we are not living in Kansas anymore, right? So if it's really different for you, you need something radically different, your change is transformational. Front and center is mindset and culture right there. That's why it's essential for us, and we can't sweep it under the rug. It is affected by and affects every project. I hear repeatedly, this is an IT project, not a human resources project. You know, people just have to use the new device, right? That's it. What's the big deal, right? But the fact that, so we're working with a huge utility who's doing an enormous transformation to a safety culture. And everyone says yes to the safety culture. Of course they would. However, the translation of that into the myriad projects, IT projects of being able to digitize information so that they have safe, reliable, accurate information when they need it in the field, it's like, well, hang on a second. Give me back my pen and my paper map, right? That's what I need, all right? Not this. I don't know this. I'm not So it's in everything that we do. We just need to look through the culture lens. So that's a part of what I want to have embed here. Culture cannot be separated from a project's content and people change plans. If your change plans are just about training and communications and not about the cultural norms and indicators required for the change to succeed, it all needs to be integrated. It needs to be integrated and needs to be built in. Having said that, culture takes longer than content. You know, it took a long time for the organization to learn how to operate this way. It takes long. It's easier to replace a device or a system than it is actually to get people to behave differently. Is that a reason not to do it? Absolutely not, because it will never stick. You'll get snapback or you'll get drag on, and you won't get the adoption and sustainability that you need. So what you're after here is building in a realistic plan, and I'm going to give you some tips on doing that. Here's a key one, and this is an eye-opener for leaders. And again, if you can give tangible examples like engineering and manufacturing don't talk, really critical. The lack of addressing this impacts leadership credibility. People know that the organization isn't designed to achieve those outcomes. And because no one's looking at it or attending to it or calling people to it, it's, leaders, they're out to lunch, right? They just think it's the change will take place next Tuesday approach. They send out the email and that's the end of it, right? And we know, I'm exaggerating, but we know that doesn't work. So what we're after here is recognizing, so I'm going to go into some strategy pieces for you now. There are two major ways of addressing culture. One is lead with culture change as the primary goal of the project. So that's similar to what we heard about today from Bill and Gerard. Culture change, become a relationship organization, become a patient-centered healthcare system, become a safety culture in this utility. Those are general, generic culture change efforts, and we go at culture in a general way, and then we back into the changes required in the organization. So that's one strategy. We start with generic culture. The second strategy is lead with all the projects that we're asked to support. If it's an IT project, what are the cultural requirements for that IT project to be adopted and sustained? What's really needed culturally? So this is the culture lens that I'm asking you to look at, to really tease out. How do people need to think differently? How do people need to behave differently? How do they need to relate differently? How do our teams need to operate differently? How do decisions need to be made differently? How about our incentives? How about our relationship to sharing information, communications? I'm about to give you a long list of cultural indicators that help us to get tangible. Again, 2 ways to look at the indicators of culture. So I developed this, by the way, years ago when I realized how important culture was to the work that we were doing, but there was no there. You know, it's like, so what do you actually see in the organization that is culture, right? So I just want to pause for a minute, you know, just call them out. What do you see that's culture? Anybody? Yes?
How people speak up or don't speak up.
How people speak up or don't, right? So there's a degree of safety, of confidence, of the ability to, you know, give bad news. Yeah, yes?
Are you allowed to contact your boss's boss directly?
Beautiful. Are you allowed to contact your boss's boss directly, right? The go-around strategy. Beautiful. How else? Yes? Who makes decisions and how they're made? And I want to add to that. And are they carried through? And does anybody hold anybody accountable even though you got the head nod? Yeah? Excellent. Anyone else? Yes?
Competition amongst people in executives?
Yes. Competition was the word you used? Yes. So the politics among executives, and is that ever addressed? Is it ever dealt with? And what impact does that have on those teams' ability, engineering, manufacturing, their ability to work together? Yes?
White knight syndrome, that we go and fix things because we broke it, but now we're really great because we fixed it. The white knight syndrome.
The white knight syndrome, I didn't get that. The white knight syndrome, yeah. So how many fires this is a great one. How many fires can we start because we get kudos for putting out fires? And if that's the way, that's the incentive system here, let's go start fires, right? Ah. Anyone else? Couple?
How performances managed or recognized, rewarded.
Absolutely. Performance management and incentives, recognition systems, pure culture. Yes. All right. So you have. I'm going to give you a bunch of them. You have a lot. So I'm assuming everybody has a handout. And what I'm going to show you, I'm not going to read this list. You have it in front of you. I want to call out. This thing is here. So before I proceed to that, I also want to say everything that you've mentioned here may show up in a project. So one is general around the organization, how you see these general things. A lot of things that you mentioned are generic to the organization. So if you think about general indicators of culture, what you're thinking about is specifically which ones support or inhibit business success. That's how we're looking at this. Which ones support or inhibit, okay? And for those of you doing generic culture work, you may do a general culture audit, an assessment. There are lots of really good assessments out there for general culture. What we do is we use human synergistics because their circumflex applies at so many levels, individuals and teams and management and leadership, etc. There are many, and they're useful as long as, here's a kicker, you do something with the data. You do something with the data. right? So we worked with one organization that's assessment happy, and progress neutral would be kind, right? They just, it's like, oh, that's interesting, thank you, right? Or I don't like those results, forget it. You know, so it's culture. There's culture right there. Well, that was a big eye-opener for me. So it's like, wait, here's the data you asked for. Now let's go do something with it. So anyhow, culture audits, very, very useful as long as you build into the strategy and the process beforehand what you're going to do with it. Project indicators, easier for us to look at sometimes. Projects you have your hands on, you're asked to support. What specifically is required for the future state to succeed? What kinds of communications, what kinds of behaviors, what kinds of mindsets, what kinds of decision making, what kinds of whatever is required culturally, the indicators that you just described. How do you need people to act, relate across boundaries, support each other? What does it look like in action? We so frequently get handed a content solution that looks great on paper, but what's it look like in action? So how do we create scenarios for how the human beings who have to live this and carry it out actually interact with each other? So a culture lens to look through. Now, here's the list and the handout that you have in front of you. So again, I'm not going to read these. I have 3 slides of them. They cover the same list. There's at least 1 or 2 on each page though that I want to highlight for you because we're finding them to be really critical leverage points. So there is an emergence in general in organizations towards what we call, and the thing I want to emphasize here, cross-boundary support as an indicator of culture. So Gerard talked about relationships. That's what this is. So engineering, manufacturing, whatever it is, IT, supply chain, it shows up everywhere in organizations. What kind of cross-boundary support is needed for this to work? So that's an indicator I want to point your attention to because we're finding a lot of it, and it's absolutely an essential ingredient for many projects. Next list here, again, lots of these that you might feel are very specific to your projects, and I'm going to ask you to look at that in a moment. So the issue here is what gets rewarded and punished. So someone mentioned that. And a big one around this, so 2 examples I want to give you. One is we reward individual contribution. Well, what does that say about people who have to work in the team? Then it sets up all kinds of competition and dysfunction in the teams because we're not in it together, we're in it for ourselves. That's culture. So what does that say in terms of the reward system? The other is not holding people accountable. Saying you have a reward system that does this, and you don't hold people's feet to the fire around it. So looking at that as well. Colluding, I would describe it as colluding with the bad behavior because no one wants to deal with it. This issue here of handling mistakes, we worked with one healthcare organization, marvelous, wonderful people. And a faith-based organization, healthcare system, so really deeply heartfelt individuals. And they had a cultural norm that said, you don't call anybody out on anything, totally conflict averse, right? Anything that has to be adjusted, handle it behind the scenes, if at all. And I dubbed them the price of nice, right? It was so difficult to get them to have constructive, realistic, business-based decisions that someone had to, contribute more than someone else, or someone had to own up that they weren't following through on a decision made, or whatever it was. They just didn't have that backbone, and they absolutely, as an organization, absolutely needed it. So that's another one. So here, openness to learning and feedback is the one I've highlighted here, because in transformational change, for those of you that have that level, that magnitude of change going on, we don't have clear future states. We don't have clear timelines. We don't have clarity about what is emerging to create the outcome that we need. It's one of the other definitions of transformation. The strongest avenue, strategy that we have for doing it as quickly and as best as we possibly can is learning and course correction. Learning and getting feedback, asking the organization what's working, what's not working, and how quickly can we rapidly course correct. So if you have a culture that says kill the messenger of bad news, right, you don't do this very well. And it's a critical cultural inhibitor to the success of transformation. So this is a huge cultural shift that's required, that we're open to feedback as long as we can consider it in the light of, will it help us deliver our outcomes? Get it? Make sense? So I just wanted to give you, this is way too fast because I have a lot that I, of course, want to, talk with you about. So homework assignment rather than here, okay? So you're going to look at that list of indicators. It's not complete. Add to it. See what's true in your organization. Think about a project and circle those pieces that are actually leverage points for you to bring to light and to find a way to build in to your plans, okay? So that there's something tangible, there's a story you can tell, there's evidence you can give, there's impact you can describe that can be felt, not just in the head as data out there, but in the gut, okay, that can be felt. This is important. We as leaders need to take this on. So what I want to do is share with you very quickly 7 strategic levers that we use when we formulate a culture change strategy. Now these are strategies, so they're still fairly general. I'm not going to talk you through each of the subpoints. You have them on the handout there, but I do want to highlight a few pieces of this. Think about what you have done, what you might do, what you need to do in your projects in relation to these. So first off, right from the beginning, and ideally if you're called in at the beginning of a change effort, that's the ideal for this, tie culture change to achieving the business results of that project. Every project needs to be tied to business results, right? Otherwise, we've got way too much going on. Why do it? Right? Tie it directly to business results. And it's not just nice things that we're doing, it's business results. So part of the growth for us is how to get tangible into the shoes of the business and talk in those terms, right? So how is culture change absolutely essential for us to live differently, produce differently, adopt and sustain this particular result, okay? Tie it to the business. The key things here, keep attention, the last one I want to highlight, keep attention on both results and culture as key accountabilities for executives. Executives have to be champions of culture. This one VP of finance, what he became champion of was the relationship between engineering and manufacturing, because that was tangibly what he could get. But he wanted to champion that because he saw the importance of it to the result. That's okay. He doesn't have to take on the whole command and control culture that was living there or realize that he was modeling it. It was okay with me. Just take on this piece. It's okay. Let's make progress on this piece. And so the executives themselves needed to, and you'll see this a few times, needed themselves to take this on and recognize their part in contributing, colluding with the old state and taking on, modeling the new state. So here's this one. Assess your current culture, our current or old way of doing things, and use the indicators to do this, those things that are relevant to your projects. To generate data to create explicit tension, underline those words, explicit tension between the old way of doing it and the new way of doing it. To give you an opportunity to really recognize that, oh, we're now living in a different way. We need to do this differently. You can't wait 2 weeks to input data on your patient care because other people need to see it immediately, right? It's got to be done now. And so that old state is, I'll fill it in, on my weekend when I have time. People need access to that data now for patient safety. And so old state, new state, wherever you go, and legitimize the fact that you can hold up the mirror So this is a skill for us as consultants. When you get blessed to do this kind of work, to be able to say, I want to be able to call attention to old state versus new state when it shows up, and it will, and then be very forgiving. We're not judgmental about this. It's, one of our little models is no blame, no shame, right? It's just objectively observing, hey, old state, oops, got it, and new state so that it's clear, all right? And then the details of this last one's a wonderful one. Personalize the culture data, the indicators you have, to leaders' style and mindset. To leaders' style and mindset. We worked with one research laboratory, brilliant people in this place, and part of what the CEO wanted to do was to create a more engaged culture. Two things occurred there. He said, great, I want to send out an email mandating everybody engage in everything that they have, hang on a second here, right? And the other thing was, I want to push decision-making down. And so the first 3 critical decisions that we got the project team to take on, and they came back with him, he said, absolutely not. Do it this way. It was like, okay, hold up the mirror. And he needed to recognize that it was also him. It was also him. Frequently you'll get, go change them. Red flag, right? It's the leaders themselves. We call it changing the game. It's the leaders themselves. That's who people are looking at. And they're not the only ones, but clearly they're important. All right. Third strategy, generating breakthroughs in leaders' mindsets and behaviors so they become champions and models. I've given you some examples of this. Making this absolutely explicit is really, really key because it is about the leaders. We worked with one organization, actually a number of them. We have a training program that we call Leadership Breakthrough. So giving leaders breakthrough training so they get to see themselves objectively and compassionately and how they are actually walking backwards in their leadership style, given what they want to create in the organization. So we worked with one utility organization, and the CEO, it took a while, but through his Walk the Talk breakthrough program, he realized that he was the key inhibitor to the future of that organization. He was the key inhibitor. And he, with a lot of support, created a 2-day visioning conference for the future of that organization. Never called the top 300 people, 300 leaders together in that organization ever. And so 2 days, top 300 leaders, and he opened the conference by saying, I'm the reason why. I mean, the entire place, he said, I have gotten in the way of your creativity, of your innovation, and where we need to go in a deregulated environment is in places I've never lived in before. So I can't control what you do. I need to listen to what you do. I got to say, there wasn't a dry eye in the house. It was 20 years of that leadership style, but he got it. He got it. And then so we continue to follow it up with, it's not just, is there life after inspiration? You really need to support with coaching and reinforcement on this. But leaders championing and modeling, absolutely critical. 4, create overt modeling mechanisms by redesigning those cultural indicators. So the ones you circle on that sheet or the other ones that you come up with that are relevant to your projects, what's that? If that's the old, can you define the old way? And how would you describe the new way? And how do you create modeling mechanisms for those? What are the critical kinds of things that you can, oh, here we go again. All right. And 5, design and implement your project plans to model the desired culture. 2 things here when I say it's one plan. How many of you live in an organization that currently has project plans and change management plans? Way too many hands. It's one plan. How many of you have one integrated plan? Let me see those hands. Okay, good, love it. How many of you have no plans at all? All right, what we're after here is an integrated plan that incorporates culture, all the content work, all the people work. It's task-based as you proceed through the process of that change. So designing the plan to reflect the desired culture, it's an acceleration strategy. You can't wait to get there. Start today. How would we do this differently? How would we make decisions differently? How would we hold ourselves accountable differently? Right? How would we walk the talk differently? Really critical pieces here. The one thing that I want to share here that helps this, so most organizations these days have change dashboards. I'm assuming, yes, most everybody here change dashboards, good. So when I look at most of the change dashboards, it's content related. We have problems with the solution, right? Or there might be, or red, yellow, green. Okay, we're red around getting people to adopt. Okay, so monthly or weekly, or whatever it is, reporting on red, green, and yellow, terrific. What happens to that red? What do you do about it? How do you reshape your plan to deal with the human, cultural impacts of it? I love the fact that we're able to assess. I hate the fact that the data that we generate from our assessments falls on deaf ears or doesn't have leadership accountability tied to it. So in one organization we have now, they have a change health scorecard is what they call it. And it goes through content, people, and process, including culture and mindset and engagement of stakeholders. And anytime, just in the last several weeks, because we're doing a major leadership mindset shift for them around their change leadership, making them conscious change leaders. So now they have a new motto. It says, red is great, right? That's the thing. If it's red, it means we recognized we need to do something differently. We as leaders need to do something differently. They're holding their jobs differently. So really, really critical, build into your dashboards, what are you doing about culture? And again, some of the things that I've seen, there's a culture checkbox and a high, medium, low, high cultural impact. What are you going to do with that data, right? How does that inform anything happening in the project, in the design, in the communication, in understanding the impacts, in the implementation planning? All right, 6, really quick. Aligning the organization, this is a key one as well. So you may be working on a project, or even if it's generic culture change. What about the rest of the organization needs to be realigned to fit that cultural outcome? Right? Structure, process, business process, technology, etc. How do you make it all fit so it's all congruent? That's what's critical, and that may expand your scope, which is one of the elements here. Maybe not your scope, but the project sponsor's scope, recognizing it. And let me finish with overtly recognize, communicate, and reward desired behavior beyond adoption and sustainment phases. Keep it going. It's an ongoing process. Keep it alive, champion it, celebrate it, recognize it, incentivize it, support people to continue growing as they recognize the power of what they're doing. So, homework for you on that would be to look at those 7 levers and see which ones you could put to work right now. You don't have to do all 7. What would you put to work on right now? So here's the contact information for us. We have a booth here, happy to talk with you further. Let me conclude by saying, first of all, I very much appreciate your time and attention today on this really critical topic. For us, it is a make or break factor in this profession, having the ability to make the difference that we're here to make and that we need to make. So put on your culture lenses, think about it tangibly as much as you possibly can, and design it into your process plans going forward, and be the culture that you want to see in the organization. It's up to us. Thank you for your time.